Welcome everyone to today's live session on marketing and branding in food and agriculture. This is a topic that is really close to my heart. I have a lot of experience and expertise. I've been in food and ag for over 20 years, and a large part of my career in this industry has been in helping food and ag companies at the multinational through to fast-growing startups really gain competitive advantage through differentiating marketing and branding. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to learn from the real experts, Anna and Marc. Thank you so much for joining today's call. And the purpose of these calls is, of course, to provide knowledge and expertise and insights and experience from your backgrounds, in the industry to those participants in the TFF Challenge so that they can really learn from you and elevate their submissions into this year's competition. So we have attendees from all over the world who are attending right now in the live session, and they can submit questions and topics that they want to be covered into the chat panel, and I will do everything I can to get to those. But in addition, we are recording this, and we will make this available to all TFF Challenge participants around the world. You know, we have thousands of them, literally from every corner of the planet, who are developing amazing projects across the whole food and ag value chain. So today we wanted to get to some really practical tips and tricks that can help these teams who are building startups. How can they differentiate themselves in the market? How can they, do things differently and special in the marketing and branding space that can help them really succeed? But before we dive into those core topics, I'd love it if you guys could introduce yourselves. So Anna, let's start with you. Tell us about you personally, and also the work that you do at this amazing organization, Blend Hub.
Yeah. So thank you, first of all. Thank you, Christine, for having me, and thank you all the attendees of this webinar. It's an honor to be here and be able to talk to you about a little bit about myself and about Blend Hub. Well, I originally I am Brazilian. I was born in Brazil, and I was born and raised, and there I pursued the communications and the audiovisual field. So I love to tell stories, and so I ended up having a degree in cinema. But of course, cinema is very exciting, and it's lovely to be able to do films, but everybody has to eat. So if you are not born in a golden bed, you have to take to be able to support yourself, pay the bills. So I joined a communication agency who did most pharmaceutical companies, so big pharmaceuticals like Pfizer, Novartis, Merck, and Dome, and I stayed there for 10 years. And at the end of the day, I was a little bit frustrated because I couldn't fulfill my storytelling call, and I was working kind of poorly for not so good corporations make more money. So I was really, really frustrated. And when I had the opportunity, I moved to the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, I wanted to do it all over again. And so I started to work strictly with NGOs, with a super inspiring mission and all the good deeds. And it was wonderful for a while. But these NGOs that I work with, they lack the other part, the professional part, to be able to be sustainable and to be able to sustain themselves and not rely so much in funding, in subsidies. And so I was kind of frustrated as well because I couldn't get the things in the long term. So after that, I moved to Spain, and here I met Blend Hub, and I stalked Blend Hub for a couple of months because I really believed in their mission, and I really believe that we could have a bigger purpose without losing focus in being sustainable and be able to support yourself and being a for-profit company. So that's where I finally found the balance between the two worlds, the strictly capitalist money thing, and well, the
and purpose. Yeah.
yes, and the purpose. So I'm very happy to be where I am right now. And yeah, and in a few minutes I'm going to explain. I don't know if I go forward, or I wait for Marc to
Yeah, let's
introduce
have
himself.
Marc introduce himself,
Yes,
personal
yes,
background, and then we'll have each of you respectively tell about your organizations
that's
before we
good.
dive into the topic. But yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Thank you both. And hello, everyone from all over the world. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and share some of our personal experiences, and hopefully to improve your lives, improve your business decisions, and maybe get some new ideas in terms of how you're going to brand and communicate your offers in the future. Quick background from my end. I'm a New Yorker, grew up in Manhattan, and studied a combination of international relations, psychology, and later business. When I was a young graduate, I decided to move to Paris, lived there for 13 years, working with all sorts of organizations, starting out in the and almost NGO, it's a UN agency space, working for UNESCO, and then quickly I moved into the private sector as a communications consultant, then went off and was an entrepreneur for a while during the startup bubble, then realized, maybe I need to get a business degree, I need to know my stuff a little bit better, and decided to pursue an MBA, still in France, in Paris. Had an absolutely amazing 2 years doing my MBA, and then moved eventually into consulting, but with a focus on marketing and strategic marketing. And there I really got an amazing opportunity to work with some of the biggest companies in the world, some of our favorites and some of our not so favorites, but getting a real opportunity to be exposed to corporate culture, corporate environment, big time CEO decision making versus small project management. So it was a real eye opener into that whole world. Until one day I got a call from a company called Syngenta, and that's where Christine and I met. And they were looking for a regional marketing manager. And I told them, but I live in Paris. I work on like FMCG stuff, agriculture, Basel. What are you guys talking about? And they said, come on over. We want people with an external eye to come into our organization and look at things a little bit differently. So it was a very encouraging environment to be brought into, because that's what they were looking for. And Syngenta, I had a fantastic 7-year run there, getting promoted a couple of times and eventually becoming their global head of branding and customer insight. And to be in that position in such a large organization with such a massive footprint in the world was absolutely thrilling, to be able to build a team in that environment, to be responsible for not multi-million dollar brands, $100 million brands, and making sure that they're rolled out in the right way, and in a very particular way, which we'll probably talk about later, because you're talking to farmers and you're talking to distributors. You're not talking to the local customer or consumer that walks around in the supermarket. So fascinating 7 years. Learned a tremendous amount about leadership, people management, stakeholder management, third-party relations, executive senior management. It was a very, very rich experience. I never thought I would do it because I'm kind of an atypical profile. Don't really fit into boxes. But Syngenta really gave me a fantastic opportunity to let me be who I was within this corporate environment. And then, as all good things do, it comes to an end. And we had a friendly splitting of ways, and I decided to then set up my own company, which is just a little consulting firm where I continue to do marketing strategy, branding, communications, and workshop facilitation. And in parallel, because I have a deep personal interest in everything that is self-discovery, I'm in the process of developing a new offer. Part of it is coaching and personal development, and another part is it's a digital platform for people who are looking for and offering what we're calling self-discovery journeys. So
Cool.
that's
And you can hear more about that from Marc in some of his founders therapy sessions that he's running with TFFers. So we have a jack of all trades here. That's great. And yeah, before I just really quick, because I do want to dive into the content of today, you know, which both of you have definitely shown you have a lot of like experience and passion around, which is like storytelling, as well as like customer insight gathering and marketing in a really business-like way. I want to dive into that. But before I do, can you in 1 minute explain Blend Hub for us, Anna? Because I think, Marc, I don't want to like take away from what Syngenta is, but I think everyone kind of knows Syngenta at this point, big agribusiness in CP, crop protection, seeds, and digital technologies. But Blend Hub is a little bit new in the stage. So if you don't mind spending 1 minute telling us a little bit more about Blend Hub.
Yeah, of course, yes. As Christina said, opposite from Syngenta, which is a huge corporation with footprint everywhere, we are a small company. We have around 100 employees around the world, divided in 5 hubs. And what we do is that we work with food powders. We transform, we use food powders. We leverage food powders as a sustainable source of food that can be combined with other ingredients and easy to be transported and with a longer shelf life, and that can be combined with other ingredients in order to provide safer, cheaper, and better food for all. So it's not, so we have nowadays we have 5 blending hubs around the world, 1 in Spain, 2 in India, 1 in Mexico, 1 in Colombia, and we are building the second one in Mexico because we have had demand, and we all our hubs are connected in the cloud, so we can if you have a recipe producing with us in Mexico, we can source local ingredients in India and deliver your product there without having to transport a lot of ingredients. I mean, you can transport just the core. So it's a very effective and a cost-effective solution to be able to distribute food around the world.
Decentralized food production with like local source. It's very cool. I think we could even do like a deep dive just on Blend Hub at some stage. We'll have to make that happen. Yeah. But let's jump into the topic, because I have to say this was like a big thing that I pushed for in this next gen accelerator that we built at TFF. So we really wanted to build the food and ag startup accelerator of the future that focuses on the learning needs and preferences of young people in every part of the world. And we did like a big survey of people within our community and outside to understand, you know, how they learn, what kind of things they're looking for specifically as they're developing startups. And the other thing was like the specific needs of food and ag. How do we address, this is a really unique sector. And even, you know, what is the difference between food and ag in today's world? It's getting blurrier and blurrier. But the point is, there are specific challenges that this sector faces that, for example, tech, which is where a lot of startup acceleration focuses, right? It's different. It's very different. And how do we solve for those unique challenges? And I think one of the biggest spaces is certainly around like understanding your customers and communicating and marketing to those customers. And maybe I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with you, Marc, but one point I want to say is, at least in my experience, it's true in today's world for ag tech companies, for example, their customer is the farmer, but we all in the 21st century need to be thinking about society at large and communicating also that impact to the average consumer. There's more transparency in the food system than ever. Especially with the millennials and Gen Zs, we have more conscious consumers. So almost everybody who's playing a part into this space needs to be thinking about not only their direct customer, but you know, the kind of bigger picture and how they're being part of solving these big global challenges. So I would love to hear some thoughts from you specifically on what you think is, you know, unique about this sector, and you know, where people can really get started in a very practical sense about thinking about, you know, marketing and branding in this space. And I know that's a very broad question, but I think if we can start broad and then hone in on some of the specifics, it would be helpful for the audience.
Shall I start?
Please, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think first things first, marketing. What is marketing about? You have an offer, a product, and you have customers. You need to understand the two in so much detail that you can speak to them like it were the back of your hand. And that's the art of marketing. It's as simple as that. You have an offer and you have something, you're marketing towards a specific type of population. Now, where it gets more interesting, and Christine kindly highlighted my Gen X generation by not talking about the greater purpose. But
Sorry.
no, I don't mind at all. But it's absolutely true. As soon as I think to have a strong brand, it has to have somewhere in it purpose. And the greatest brands have a deeper purpose in what they're doing, and that communicates not only through their corporate communications and the way their executives behave, but also trickles down into the way they communicate the products, the type of people that they want to communicate to, and those also their ambassadors. So absolutely critical to have those three. What is the purpose? What is my product? And who am I offering it to? Now, I have my personal little 3 C's. So for people who've been to business school or whatnot, this might sound a little bit familiar.
Love those kind of tools. Break it down for us. Yeah.
So my three C's versus the standard 4 P's of marketing are customer, consistency, and creativity. Okay, those are the 3 most important things to consider when marketing, whether it's in ag, whether it's in other industries. You've got to have a deep understanding of who your customer base is. And that leads to one of the first key challenges in ag. Ag has a very diverse value chain. So there are lots of different players in ag. You don't have just manufacturer and end consumer. You've got about, depending on whether it's crop protection, seed treatment, seeds, seed technologies, you're going to have a different set of people in that value chain. So you're going to have different target audiences. And therefore, you're going to have to communicate a similar offer in different ways to these different audiences. And that's very challenging because you're ending up spreading your resources to lots of different groups rather than be able to focus it on one. So Nike or Coke versus Syngenta or a DuPont or some of the other leaders in there have completely different approaches. I would say ag is very fragmented and specific, whereas the FMCG companies, they can go broad, and then because of digital marketing and social media, can go super individual. Whereas you can't really do that yet in ag.
Well, tell me about that 3rd C though, creativity. That's interesting.
Okay, so let me go to, we'll put creativity second. Okay. So creativity, what does that mean to people? I think a lot of people, when you hear the word creativity, it means something that stands out, something that's different, something that is memorable. So memorable, different, stands out. These are the things that those are the key success factors to great marketing. If you can stand out and be memorable amongst the pack, if you can differentiate with a cool offer or with a tone of voice, you become memorable. And that's what you want, because we're all exposed to so many different brands a day. If you think about it, now I'm showing my age, but the last study I read, we're exposed to between 800 and 1,200 brands a day just by waking up, going outside the supermarket. So how do you differentiate in all that clutter? And that's the true art of a marketer. How do I differentiate in a memorable way? So that's where, for me, creativity comes in. You can also add into creativity fun. So the 3 things that people remember most are funny things, so funny creative things, sexy creative things, and in some cases, it's very memorable and not always fun to talk about, but death, some form of relationship to death.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the 3 things that people remember most.
And if I can give my 2 cents about creativity, that's exactly what we tell about when you're telling about storytelling. That's you have to tell a story that relates to your interlocutor, to understand that it relates to your consumer. So, and I cannot stress it enough. Every time I'm writing an email, I make sure sure that in the first paragraph of my email is the essence of the things that the interlocutor wants to hear, that is going to make them interested in what I have to say. And that's the same thing about with social media posts. I don't start a social media post saying Blend Hub is a 20-year-old company, blah blah blah. No, you have to tackle first exactly what the consumer will interest in him. So and that comes if you stick to this premises, you find your way to speak to different stakeholders and different profiles. If you do that, it's like a great storyteller. I forgot her name. So she's a writer, and she said, "We can make everything into a interesting story." If you think about the Red Hood story, you always begin with there was this little girl that she went to visit his grandma, and blah blah blah, and if you know already what the Red Hood is all about, you are not interested in that anymore. If you know the lines of the story. So how can I tell the Red Hood story again and make it interesting? You can start with, it was dark inside the wolf's belly, and with that you get your hook. And with that, people, now I want to hear the story. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And that makes it memorable and everything that Marcus was telling us about.
And like speaking from firsthand experience, so the people that are on this call are like creating or accelerating startups, early stage usually. And I love what you're saying, Anna, about you have to make your story the story that the customer kind of is interested in, wants to hear. But we're like also trying to build investor decks, right? Or like talk to people. And so that's all about just telling your story over and over. And so it's hard sometimes to like change it up, right? And like on the marketing side, it's actually not selling yourself too hard, right? But tapping into some of these like creative and, consistent and cool messages that get you noticed. But like to investors, it's like just telling about yourself. So like, how do you because we're all bootstrappy small teams trying to do a lot with limited resources. How do we do this mindset shift, between these different target audiences, and, map this out well? Because I can tell you, even at Thought for Food, we fall into the trap of like, we're just so used to being like, here's our core message, and we just repeat it. And yeah, we have to step back and say, not everyone, wants to just hear your story from the beginning. They, they want a little bit of that, like, flavor of the day, kind of making our interest their interest type of thing. Do you see what I mean? So
yes,
how do you
not only
raise money? Yeah.
Not only I know what you mean. That's my challenge also every day, because we have to relate to customer, but you have on the other part, in the corporate part, we have to attract the right partners. We want to set up some straightforward relationships that do not involve selling your product, but to appear valuable to someone else. And this is a totally different conversation. Of course, you keep the consistency of telling how your product or your services have quality and they are reliable, but you have to approach it in a different way. How I present myself as a company that someone wants to invest to. So along with a very clear mission and a very comprehensive business plan and all this documentation and story and data that you have to bring up, you have to pass the image of trust, and that you are and that how does your business model is going to be able to sustain itself and be able to escalate in the next 5 years. So it's another set of cards, completely different set of cards. A deck of cards, completely different, but you have to keep that in mind. And in every step you make, you have to have those questions. Is this what is doing for my company is going to be more valuable about because of that, or it's going to am I bringing up a liability? So
Yeah.
that's very, and it's about business building in general, not just marketing. It's not just about communication. It's how you want to grow and what you are going to do about it. Yeah.
Marc, I'm sure you have some type of frameworks in mind. You
I
always
do.
have great frameworks. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
exactly. I was going to suggest when, regardless of where you are in terms of the size and growth of a company, whether you're at the very beginning stages or in a massive, huge conglomerate, there are a couple of techniques, communication techniques that you can use that allow you to address all the different stakeholders that you need to speak to. And that's something that probably you can find by just writing in stakeholder mapping tool in Google. And you'll most
Yeah.
likely find some good PowerPoint that shows you.
Great.
Of
Yeah.
course, I can walk you guys through it, but that's not the purpose of today's discussion. But typically, the order in which you would do something is first you want to come up with your overall messaging framework.
Mm.
So what do I stand for? What is my value proposition overall? What are those big themes that I want to communicate around? And what are those 3 or 4 big points that I need to communicate within each theme? Once you have that framework, then you do your stakeholder mapping. Who are my most influential stakeholders? Who are the most important ones? And the recommendation I would make, especially when you're in the beginning phases, everyone's a stakeholder. Your mom's a stakeholder. Your uncle's a stakeholder. Your friend's a stakeholder. The investors are stakeholders. Just be open to anyone being a stakeholder. And then from there, once you've mapped out who your stakeholders are, how much influence they have or importance or impact they might have on your business, then you move to the next stage, which combines your messaging framework and your stakeholder mapping. You match the two.
Yeah.
And that's a very simple approach. It's the who, what, where, when, how kind of. So what am I saying? To whom am I saying this? When am I saying it? Why am I saying it?
Right.
Because you always need the rationale. And how am I saying it? So what type of channel? Is it a face-to-face conversation? Is it a social media post? Is it a forum? And by doing that kind of very rigorous work, you will soon get you'll get a full picture of just all the different things that you need to do. And because you've got the full picture, you can start prioritizing. So if you're in a stage where BlendHub is, for example, where it's both we need customers, but we also need investors, you're going to have priorities there. So how much of my time, resource, when you're in the beginning stages, time is your resource.
Yeah.
But then later when you have money, money becomes a resource. How do I split it between those two in a way where I'm getting impact from both? Because those are both, in BlendHub's case, those are both the key growth factors right now.
And I love this, like stakeholder mapping and really getting kind of like mechanical, right? About like kind of mapping all of the information you have and the who, what, when, where, why, how. One question, or one thing that I notice a lot in my experience working with startups, particularly in ag tech, is that one, communications is not focused on early enough. And two, when it is focused on, it's very much about the technical attributes of the solution being offered. And so what advice do you have for science-based or tech-based startups that are trying, to communicate their value proposition in the world? How much should they be focused on those technical attributes versus other types of, storytelling efforts or, other aspects of their brand, etc. Even culture, like, is that something that early stage startups should be talking about? I mean, even, as they're developing it, like how much should be aspirational? How much should be really, tested and true and all of this kind of thing? What are like some watch outs and some suggestions you have in guiding people through this topic?
I'll give it a go and then hand over to Anna. I'd like to use the metaphor of buying a car. Okay, there are different types of customers who buy the same car, but their reasons for buying the car, so their purchase behavior, is going to be different. Some people are, imagine a spectrum where this is zero technical and all looks and brand and image versus I need to know absolutely every nook and cranny of the car. I need to know what kind of bolt you used on the engine and whatnot. Okay, that's your spectrum of customers. Now, the question is, and this is where we come back to customer understanding and market research, where is your sweet spot here? Who is most likely to purchase your offer? Right? Once you've determined that, and maybe there's 3 segments. Once you've determined that, then you can decide, how do I speak to them? What level of technical information is required for them to make a purchase decision versus what level of image communications do they need to feel that this is something that adheres to their personal values.
And so, in the spirit of frameworks, I remember using one called Steeple before, which was like mapping out like social, technical, environmental, economic, legal, and ethical aspects, right, of benefits, etc., in products. And you have those like all defined, and then you can pull out whatever message is most relevant for the stakeholders that you've mapped on the stakeholder map that we've
in the end of the day, you have to know your message, being technical, being general, being purposeful, in like the back of your hand. You have to know them, and then you can combine. Generally speaking, when you want to bring public awareness of your business model, and you stick to the more simple messages, the one that will engage the people more broadly, and you bring common values or common goals. You bring common desires from the people. But in the second phase, when you are having a second conversation, you have to go a little bit deeper, and that's where you direct your message to each stakeholder.
And in that vein, I mean, we have a great question from Kabera Mutangana. And this is something I think we could all relate to, because everything that you're talking about is so necessary and helpful, but it's time intensive and often very cost intensive for early stage startups. You know, it's expensive to hire communications consultants. And it's also expensive, like when you are starting, like what are the key roles you hire for? Often communications and marketing is not like the first thing that you need, right? It's maybe technical experts or, you know, business leaders, etc. So we know that marketing and promotion require a lot of money. How can startups without much money display their products? What are some like bootstrapping tips and tricks that we can leverage? I know, for example, we do A/B testing. That's where you test 2 different types of messages to see which one like sticks through MailChimp. That's an integrated feature. And there's some, like, I'm sure other great ideas you have that can help people maybe find their way through some of these tactics.
I in Blend Hub, a person will rely a lot on social media. I think it's a very direct, and especially for Blend Hub, LinkedIn is the way to go, because it's a B2B proposition, and most of companies have their and professionals have their LinkedIn profile, and you don't have to spend much money if you are going to build brand awareness, or just making your range of followers. We have been able to double the followers of Blend Hub in the last 12 months, and that's all because of consistency and bringing some message that relate to people.
But social media can be tricky too. Do you have some guidance, maybe websites or like tips that you have about how to, you know, where should you pay? What, you know, how should you?
That's a little bit tricky. Well, invest in a good website is also a good way and then you can relate your campaigns in social media to direct it to the website. So then you have awareness in the website. Yes, in the website you have more time to explain a little bit more and raise more interest, and always leave a contact page or a chat bot so people can leave their contact details behind, so you are in touch with these people. And the email marketing is also a good tool. But I would like to point that the most powerful tool that I have encountered, the ones that really leverage the leads that will most probably turn into business, is the mouth to mouth, is referring, is references, is people talking to the peers and their colleagues. And so you have to encourage,
get out there and meet people.
yes, and ask people that are working with you to tell about you, and to ask clients to refer to you to other peers, and that's also, and that costs nothing. That costs
That's a great tip. I want to follow up on that, but Marc, how about you? What are some
Yeah.
ideas you have?
So two things maybe to add to that. One, if you're from a social media perspective, there are a gazillion startups out there that have no money. So to Cabrera's question, how do you display your products with little money, right? So social media, create an engaging story that is differentiating, memorable, consistent with your brand and your core values to get other people talking about you. Okay, that doesn't cost any money. It costs time and a little bit of creativity, right? Find that story that's going to engage people and get them talking about you, a topic that, or a conversation that you are that you're moderating. So that's on one end. The non-social media end, and social media, again, you've got to be really creative, but it's all about partnerships in the beginning. What do you have that someone else might be interested in, and vice versa? So you need to be very creative in identifying win-win situations. So other actors in your market, or tangent businesses that might have an interest in what you're doing, and figure out something that's win-win for both, where there's no exchange of money, but there's exchange of value.
Right. And by the way, I think this is such an important point, and something I've definitely experienced in working with all of these variety of startups at different stages, is also startup to startup collaboration, and the opportunity to kind of like identify where, you know, startups can work together to deliver even bigger impact and more value to the customer, right? And that's often something that maybe investors discourage, or maybe startups are scared of doing, because it is like, you know, maybe taking away from investment stories, but it can lead to a really, really interesting product offering. And to get really specific here, I see a big opportunity around that in like the precision ag tech, data-driven ag space, because there's just like so much Me Too happening there. Everyone's like having their data sets and maybe aren't integrating them in a way that delivers the most value to a grower, be it an urban grower or a traditional farmer. So anyway, it's something for the teams to think about too. I love that point about partners. And that leads me to one of the questions that's come in on chat from Australia. And Harenga's asking, you know, how do you get government endorsement? What's the value of government endorsement if you're an impact-focused venture? They feel specifically in their project that government has a role to play, but political motivation is lacking, whereas individuals and communities are very motivated. I guess maybe he's speaking about climate change. I'm guessing based on the news I've been reading. So he wants to know, like, should he be like spending time getting that government endorsement, you know, or not? And maybe, Harenga, I think your project is in like the vertical farming, urban farming space, but maybe you can, if you don't mind, chat a little bit more about your project and specifically what you want government endorsement around, while they talk at a general level about this. Yeah.
So it sounds like Harenga's point, there's a couple of things at play here. One, there is a need for government endorsement in whatever market they're working in, but there's little political support at the moment. Therefore, you have to create thought leadership around citizens who then have raised awareness of the topic, who then put pressure on political communities, who then put pressure on the government. And that's the typical cycle, regardless of the industry. In industries like ag, where it's highly regulated, right? I mean, we're creating food for people, so we need to know what's going into those crops. Government plays a critical role. Regulatory affairs is a massive, massive investment for any of these big companies. You can't sell your product without their approval. So companies
And
like,
that's not just the case for the big companies. I think like we're seeing that even in some of the like synthetic biology world and the alternative proteins, there's still some question marks about how things are going to be regulated for exactly the point you said. And so indeed having government alignment and endorsement can be helpful, right? Even in this early stage as things are being figured out from the regulatory standpoint.
if I'm correct, this is one of the beautiful offers that BlendHub has for its customers.
Mhm.
So I'll leave it there and let you explain
No,
that.
exactly, because we can offer all these certainties and take out the risk from for entrepreneurs. So we already have a facility placed in India with all the permits. We have the standard, the higher quality standards, and we need to homologate your ingredients and to see if they work together. But we take out a lot of those pains for a startup, for instance, because we work with both startups and big companies as well. But I think startups have the most in the face benefits when you take, because you take this. Yeah, and I agree with Marc when he said, if you are working with food, it's very desirable that you build a relationship with your local government as well, because you are going to require things from them, and you want them to be on your side. Of course, in 4 years, everything can happen and everything can change, but it's always good to have in the end, it's network, and the government is one of the stakeholders that you have to take into account.
And when you're doing this like stakeholder mapping, I mean, definitely something that's helped us at TFF and many of the startups we worked with has been like this exercise of clearly just defining and even like telling the story of your customer. So like specific, like what is their age? How do they shop? What are they, thinking about? What newspapers do they read? Da, 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 da. And you can start to define like some of these personas, and that then can inform like your communication, marketing, and branding strategy, right? Because you're now getting really specific about who you're targeting. So you can do the high level mapping and then also this really specific user persona definition, which is also a fun exercise to do, by the way. But like you said, and then going out and talking to people, everyone, your mom, your uncle, the person at the supermarket, the farmer, and listening to them, right?
Just one word of warning on personas. I love the exercise as well, but just for all of you out there who've maybe read and seen things about personas, just one word of advice: try to keep it simple. Don't create 14, 15 personas for your company. Otherwise, you're going to have 14, 15 messages. So for those of you trying those exercises, definitely recommend no more than 5 to start with, so that it remains consistent with your overall message. Otherwise, you're going to get spread thin.
That's
sorry.
And then testing, right, with the personas. Like, I really love, like I said, MailChimp allows you to do A/B testing, like in the platform. I think social media obviously is also a great place to experiment with messages and see like what's getting liked and what's resonating. We found in TFF, like integrating video helps magnitudes, on social media. And there's some easy tools that we can access in, cost-effective ways that you can make videos that look very professional. And those are some things we can share in like the resource pack that on the digital labs. So your colleague Anna Peleg has chimed in here to piggyback on the social media of others. We all know Peleg too, because he also used to work with us in the days of Syngenta. But he said, don't invent, but use something that is trending or controversial to place your message out there. Also, be careful in being too much NGO messaging. Feeding the world is great. Investors are looking for returns. I like maybe have some difference of opinions on some of those points, but I do want to say that I do think in today's world, this message of like, we need to feed 10 billion people, the planet is in peril, that like it's almost trite now. And I'm wondering how important that is, or whether we need to come in with something like unique and specific in how we're positioning the companies, that are taking part in TFF, are just, kind of being created in the space of food and ag. At least I'm kind of like over the 10 billion people by 2050 message, because it's not specific enough, right? Yeah.
I agree with you, Christine. I think that we need to feed the world is it's a tried message.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 5, 7, 8 years of that from all the major ag companies, including major FMCG corporations. What we want to know now is how.
Right.
So what's pertinent, and to link to Peleg's point, we know feeding the world is one of the biggest issues that we have facing us as a race, as a species. So if we know that's the right topic, look into that and see what are the trending topics. What are the biggest things people are talking about? Is it types of chemicals that are being used, or the amount of food production, or the way food is produced? Then you can pair that up to what your offer is. And as Peleg is suggesting, piggyback on that, amplify that story even more, but show how it's related to you. So it becomes specific and purposeful.
Yeah, and show that is related to you, but in a comprehensive way. Don't have to stretch your arm too far and try to make a message that do not relate to your business to make it so, right? So yeah.
Be relevant to what you're doing, for sure.
Yeah.
And the place where I was like maybe a little bit, I don't know, it's just maybe my personality, but Peleg's saying like be controversial. How controversial should, early stage startups be? And trying to get to your point about capturing people's attention, Marc, like, is controversy the way to do that, or what do you think?
So I'll respond to that question with a question. What are your values? What do you represent as a company?
Right.
If your DNA is to be controversial, Elon Musk comes to mind, as everyone refers to him right now. He's the golden boy of controversy. That's part of the DNA of the culture. So he gets away with it because it's consistent. Remember, one of the 3 C's.
He's consistently controversial.
Yes.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So that's okay. And but if you're a risk-adverse, very traditional sort of blue chip type company, family and whatnot, that's probably going to throw people off.
Looks awkward. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always use the analogy of it's like watching your dad at the disco. It's like
exactly.
You're trying, but it just looks awkward. Don't do what's true to yourself.
Yeah. Don't outreach. And also it's not exactly controversial, I think is the word, but I think it's to challenge people with your messages. I think you have to raise conversations, raise discussions, and that's what people relate to nowadays. They want. So it's not about bringing controversy in, so to speak, but to bring into debates. And that I think is everybody has to have their opinion heard, and they want to participate. People are very well informed nowadays, so everybody has want to make part of a bigger conversation.
And one of the guys who's participating on today's call, I know him well, and they have a food tech startup in Southeast Asia. And I know that they've in the earliest days of their startup have launched a podcast, right? To increase their brand, to talk to people that they're working with, to kind of convey their thought leadership. And I think this is a really interesting thing for startups to think about doing, even from an early stage, because in a way, at least in my experience, doing thought leadership helps you also define your values as a brand, because you're starting to position yourself just by going out and acting and communicating. And 2, it gives you access, because they have this podcast, right? They're able to go talk to partners and influencers, beyond just selling a product, and being be part of telling your story on our platform, which is an interesting thing for startups to think about doing, enabling others to have a voice through your brand.
But if link it back to I think that Peleg said, which was feeding the world is great. Investors are looking for returns. Investors are looking for numbers that display that your company is exhibiting consistent growth.
Right.
So if one of the tactics is to create thought leadership and to create a following, because you're using that engagement to create awareness and then eventually a platform to sell your product, investors are going to love you. I mean, if you're showing I've got 2,000 followers and 6 months later 5,000, then 10,000, then 20,000, those are clear metrics that tell an investor this company is onto something.
Yeah.
So
But again, yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. And I think every, communication effort should have some type of impact that can be in a way quantified. But this is the hardest thing. I mean, even for the most, experienced experts in the industry, measuring the impact of communications is super hard to do. We know it's important, but like understanding, what that ROI is difficult. So yeah.
I like to say we're all in a secret group. We understand.
Absolutely.
And we're very lucky when we work with people who have that that sensitivity to marketing and communication as well. Otherwise, but in business, you need to show that things are measurable. Otherwise, why do them? And that's what you're faced with when you're working with investors and very business-oriented people. You need to show some form of measurement.
But I do think and this is why we've put such an emphasis on soft skills in our digital labs, which is all around like marketing, communication, storytelling, resilience, these types of things. Because in today's world, how you lead and succeed in the market is a lot through branding and storytelling. It's a lot through the culture of your organization, which of course then feeds into your branding and storytelling and your thought leadership. And in fact, I was reading a study of Gen Zs that said, they expect companies to stand for topics, right? Like it's an expectation from the startup through to the big multinationals. They want to see, leaders taking a stance on political issues and also, big macro issues like climate change and everything. So I think there's a huge opportunity for our teams to build that in from the beginning, right? Because they are tech-driven companies, but they're also trying to make a positive impact in the world, and making that as part of the offer from the beginning, despite what investors might be, pushing them towards, can be really, it's a 21st century leadership skill, right? Yeah. And do you guys have any brands that you love in food and ag that you think are nailing it? Of course, Blend Hub. Are there ones that you're this, or Elon Musk? I mean, what do you guys think? Who are the ones that are nailing it in the startup space, right? In terms of marketing and communications and branding, of course.
Well, I think we have an avalanche of plant-based protein right now, right? And meat substitutes and alternatives. So that's the big trend right now. And as a faster, I think the most the growing FMCG product in the food industry is the alternative of of meat.
Yeah.
So Impossible Burgers and Beyond Meats and all those kind of startups that are really nailing it right now. And it doesn't mean necessarily that their product is healthier.
Of course, yeah, that's right.
But at a branding perspective, they are doing very well.
That's true, because there is a lot of questions out there about the nutritional aspect of some of these plant-based protein alternatives, particularly when they're highly processed. But it doesn't matter, because in terms of the brand and reputation, we're seeing Impossible, exactly really conveying a lot of thought leadership, and kind of that sustainability message is front and center.
Yeah, and their messages are based on the sustainability of animal protein versus a plant-based protein. So and that's, but yeah.
And
so
I love the video. That's something for everyone to check out, of the astronaut coming back to Earth. Impossible did, and you can find it on YouTube, of, wow, look at this beautiful planet that was saved because of Impossible, I guess. But yeah, it's a very emotive video. What about you, Marc?
So I'm going to be a little controversial here.
Yeah.
I say all these brands are nailing it because it's the trendy thing at the moment. Everyone wants to hear about this.
Yeah.
I say the brands to look out for, and this should be your sort of, let's call it your acid test. The brands that are being truly authentic.
100%.
Because those are the ones that will last through time, because they're staying consistent and not just following a wave. And they're being true. And coming to Gen Z and millennials, in my experience, even though I'm a Gen X, but I do work quite a bit with millennials and Gen Z, what I find resonates the most, and for the longest period of time is something that's truly authentic.
Absolutely.
No BS.
And that's where I love startups, because usually it's founders' passion, right? That's taking a startup. So in fact, those are very authentic brands typically. And in that vein, I just wanted to mention one last thing as we like close out the conversation. And by the way, anyone who wants to type, you've got 5 minutes. But I'm so thrilled. We'll be announcing this officially soon, but we're going to have an author participating in our Malaysia edition of the TFF Summit, who's just written a book all about kind of hype and smoke and mirrors in the whole startup world, which is like very interesting given, you know, Theranos and the WeWork scandal and some of these things. And I think it's something too, I'd love if you could just give some quick words about. Everyone loves an aspirational brand and like a big vision, especially that, you know, startup that's really going to change the world and disrupt the industry. But are we entering an era, to your point, of, you know, radical authenticity, and that even means maybe honing down the message and, you know, being more literal and, you know, kind of like being about what your organization can do versus, you know, change the world. Like the show Silicon Valley always makes fun of.
Yeah. I think before you even go, yes, I agree. I think authenticity will beat out non-authenticity in the long term. But we all of us who are entrepreneurs, we've got to remember something very basic. Only 1 in 10 startups work.
Right.
Okay. So you have to remember, it's so many things have to come together correctly for a startup to go to that next level. So the WeWorks of the world, they did something right, even if there was scandal and whatnot. But there is a conglomeration of things that came together at the right time in the right place for them to have the success that they've had today. Yeah. And that's the same for all the unicorns that we talked about. Yeah. And you know, we hope that we line our pieces up correctly to get that domino effect. But remember, it's 1 in 10. Okay, so I also just wanted to make a little link to what we were talking about earlier, trying to differentiate and stand out. But when you're a startup, we talked about maybe having partnerships. Remember, those people who you're competing against are most likely going to be working for you, or you're going to be working for them as that market grows and people consolidate. So think of them as your partners. Be authentic.
That's a great point. Yeah. Collaboration versus competition, or collaboration is the new competition. I love it. Anna.
Yeah, so that's all my points. Just to complement what Marc just said. So when you are addressing and trying to build your own brand, you have to be authentic, and that I agree absolutely with, but don't be afraid of failure as well. Yeah, if you don't as one in 9 in 10 startups fail. I mean, also 80% of all products, fast-moving consumer goods, fail in the first year. So, and it's not about you. And I see a lot of comment there that asks about how can I compete with the big guys, and you are not going to compete with the big guys. The big guys has another other resources, and so you have to stick what you know with and what you have to offer, and that's it, I think.
So exactly. And so I'm going to round off because we have 2 minutes left. Kabera's asking about choosing a name for your product and like how to do that when branding. I am going to actually suggest that he does a one-on-one with you, Marc, because you've developed some really cool tools to generate names and also avoid, you know, IP issues and trademark issues and things like that. Is that okay if I connect you guys directly?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I want to also just mention, do a little like self-promotion here for TFF, which is that everybody here is here to also learn and share with each other, because we're all on this entrepreneurial journey together. So the Digital Labs is not a one-way, like here, learn from these guys, because we've covered a lot of stuff today at a very, very high level. But now it's up to you, the participants in the TFF Challenge, to like take some of this, marinate on it, and then reach out and say, I would like mentorship on this specific marketing and branding topic that I'm dealing with. I would like this question answered. And we can also, in addition to official membership, raise it with all of the vast members of our community who are part of the digital labs, you know, in a kind of like collaborative, open forum, right? Ask your questions because we can all learn from each other. Tell us what has worked in your startup and what hasn't worked, because, you know, failure is something we're all going to do many times, but it's also something that we can learn from and help each other learn from. So again, we can increase the speed and impact of innovation efforts around the world. So lean into this opportunity. Like I said, this was an amazing and energizing conversation with both Anna and Marc, who are here as resources for you to carry on the conversation. Reach out to us in the core team for mentorship and bring your specific questions and ideas into the digital labs so that we can all help each other in the way that will accelerate what we're trying to do and, you know, bring that collaborative spirit into agriculture, because we want to create a new culture, right, for the food and ag. So I guess I'll like leave it at that. Maybe if you guys want to just say like anything final, and also just a huge thank you to you both. But Anna, final shout out. Yeah.
Yeah, get your message out there and test and measure it, and you're going to redo it and you test again, and it's you're not going to nail it the first time, and probably not the first 10 times, but you have to keep
learn,
doing
fail,
it.
repeat. Test, learn, fail, repeat. Yes. And Marc, what about you?
Guys, I'm going to say every now and then, just take a step back and remember to breathe. Breathe in for 4, hold it for 5, exhale for 6. Do that as many times as it takes to clear your head. You'll find the answer. Totally. We always have it in us.
And we're here to help when you can't find the answer. So that's the point of this amazing community that is TFF. Thank you both, Anna and Marc. We can't wait to continue working with you and, you know, to connect you with all of our entrepreneurs. Thanks to everyone on the call. Come to us. We're here to help, and have a very fantastic week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.